All right. All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Connection Loop. I am your host, Rob Botts, and I am here today with Sanjeev Shetty. He is the CEO and co-founder of HelloGuard, and they are addressing the work shortages in terms of physical labor with automation and robotics. It's very exciting. We're really excited to have him here today. So it's going to be a very robust conversation about not only that industry, but also challenges, sales strategies. We're all about revenue growth here at the Connection Loop and how sales leaders are really putting their minds and actions into work here. So, Sanjeev, welcome into Connection Loop.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have you. So let's start out with kind of tell everybody what what HelloGuard's all about and what your mission really is.
Yeah, so I am the CEO and co-founder of HelloGuard, and we are essentially a workforce automation company. And we sell and distribute robots, but we also have our own AI solutions. And our mission is really to solve for the critical labor shortage. If you look at the numbers, they're staggering. There's roughly 18 million shortage of workers in the world that's expected by the year 2030. Obviously, the pandemic had a lot to do with this, specifically in healthcare and hospitality, where you had several 100,000 healthcare workers leave the industry. 20% of these workers quit their jobs. And, there's also other driving forces like aging, for example. You have, a million US nurses over 50 and 40% of doctors are nearing retirement. And there's other factors like burnout and stress. There's limited training in some of these fields. And the low wages and poor working conditions are causing, people never to come back. And, we really took a close look at this and we realized that there had to be something that had to be done about it. Without workers being threatened that robots and AI are taking their jobs, and the operating risks that arise, to companies are really at a critical point, and the burnouts are high, and we wanted to address that head on with robotics and our AI solutions.
That's amazing. Talk to me about the background here. So when we think about robotics, right, from someone myself, layman's terms over here, robotics wise, you guys are the experts on this. But when you think about the dexterity of a robot and different automated, machines that are created, I noticed on one of the, I think it was one of the cleaners that you had for the aged care facilities had, I think it was over 20 sensors, I think across the entire, scrubbing machine, I believe it was. So just talk to just real quickly about how much work went into that with the design and how that was really brought to the forefront, so it was made possible for these facilities to use them.
Yeah, so anytime you're designing a robot, there's a lot of work. It's very capital intensive. Obviously, a lot of product design. You have to take into account, the environment. A big part of setting up a robot, installing it is mapping. So the robot has to have certain, cameras, lidars, sensors, so that it can, figure out where it is and figure out its environment. So a lot of work goes into, those little nuances, like, having a 3D lidar, for instance, is so critical. Being able to, have large maps, or being able to see, a certain surrounding and know that there's certain obstacles in place, or being able to identify a glass wall, for example, is also critical. So there's a lot of work that goes into the design of these robots, and it's no small task.
Well, I've got to say, mission accomplished in terms of what you've done. It's just absolutely just amazing. What about okay, so you have everything created. It's in reality, it's out there. Now, whenever you have a great, obviously, product or service, and we talk about this a lot on Connection Loop, it's about getting that obviously out to the correct audience, the correct vertical, and selling that exact thing. So For you, what has been the most effective sales strategy that you've used so far in 2024 that's worked well for getting that word out so people understand it, want to use it, etc.?
Yeah, I think the most effective sales strategy is to understand where the highest demand is and where the highest need is. And for us, that translates to where is the most, where's the most pain felt in terms of labor. And we intentionally decided that those three industries, senior living, healthcare, and hospitality, were the industries where we're going to focus. Because a lot of times, people tend to boil the ocean, and it's like, do we go with a shotgun approach or a rifle approach? And we kind of went with the rifle approach because we felt like these industries were in the most pain and in dire need of help. So we focused on those three industries to begin with. Of course, we have expanded since then and gone into verticals like airports and shopping malls and retail, et cetera. But I think the best sales strategy is to figure out where the highest demand is, where the biggest pain is, and then applying robotics and applying workforce automation solutions to those verticals, and understanding the pain points in those verticals, understanding the daily challenges that they face, and then showing them through things like ROI calculators and being on site doing a demo. People want to touch and feel these things. Can't be on a Zoom talking about robots. So we do a lot of travel. And there's no way to avoid that. You have to be there on site. We invite people to come to our warehouse, our labs. We have regional expos. We go to a lot of trade shows. We were at CES last year. We go to industry shows and so on and so forth. So I think the bottom line is, if I were to summarize it, people have to see the product. People have to see the value it brings to them. And I think you also need to understand the specific challenges that arise in those industries.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. A lot of the times, whenever, especially here at Dub, when we talk about sales strategy, just in general, really not trying to boil the ocean is the biggest thing. Really leaning into those different areas, those different niches that it makes sense. And the great thing about your industry is, even though you are in those verticals of the airports, the hospitality, senior care living, the massive application for what you're doing is only going to expand as far as that. So you're really on the forefront of what's happening. What about a challenge? Everyone likes a good challenge, right? Like the movie Rocky. Rocky doesn't win in the first Rocky. He eventually wins. He goes through the challenge, right? People love a good story about a challenge, mistake, things you've overcome. So if you take a look at just maybe recent history, what's been a mistake that stood out for you that maybe was made on your end? You're like, that was a mistake and we learned from
it. I think that the mistake we make sometimes is we try to do too much and throw too much at the customer. Sometimes less is more. And what I mean by that is giving them one solution and kind of stair-stepping it before we try to sell them more. Oftentimes you throw the kitchen sink at the customer and they're like, whoa, this is a little too much, or it's overwhelming, or the sticker shock. So I like to say, start small. Rome wasn't built in a day, right? So everything you have to be prepared for robotics and AI. You can't just jump in and say, okay, bring everything to me. And what I mean by that is, if you're going to adopt robotics, maybe start with one, get a feel for it, because there's so much that goes into just preparing for it, right? You got to make sure you got good infrastructure. You got to have what we call a robotic czar, or someone who is the sponsor for those robots, right? You can't just throw robots into a building and say, go for it, right? Someone needs to be trained. Same thing with AI. People think that AI is this cool new buzzword that you can just adopt and, start using these large language models. I mean, your brain needs to be trained on how to prompt these models. It's not just about learning AI, right? So there's a lot of preparation and legwork that goes into this. And I think if I were to say the biggest challenge is just adoption and getting people to understand that this is a process and it takes time, and methodically, with certain processes in place. You have to have the people in place. You have to have the technology infrastructure in place. So it's kind of like a pyramid. You got to have the foundation, and AI and robotics is at the top of the pyramid. But the first, layer or foundation of that pyramid at the bottom is your infrastructure, people, process, right?
And I think also too, you mentioned something that really is important, and we try to emphasize this as well. Use cases, someone understanding specific, clear use cases of what the product or service would be, and the way you have your site laid out, and the way you describe the different models that you have and what they're used for, right? And it's a medicine delivery, cleaning, all that good stuff. People can see that and understand that in their mind, like, oh wow, that's how that would do that. So the clarity, I think, is really important, and it's probably one of the most important things. Let's take the other side of it. So let's go. Okay, we talked about challenges, mistakes. What's the most important thing that you've learned? If you had to really boil it down, this year, 2024, you've been doing your thing. When you sit down at the end of the day, you're like, wow, that's been the most important thing we've really kind of discovered and learned this year.
Yeah, I think when it comes to just selling robotics and adopting technologies like AI, there's a lot to absorb, right? And I think what I have learned is that you need some small, quick wins when it comes to customers. Um, and a quick win could be as simple as, "Hey, I've solved one problem. Let's move on to the next." Right? Oftentimes, people try to solve too much, and they fall flat and fail. So we like to sort of piecemeal things and say, let's break this, elephant and eat it one chunk at a time, right? And there's a lot of hype around AI. I'm sure you've seen that as well, right? And people don't really understand it. There's a lot of money being thrown at it. So we are taking sort of a unique approach in the sense that we are learning from our past mistakes, and we're saying, let's not make the same mistakes again, and let's go at it from a slightly different approach. So, for example, I'll give you a good example of this. So, in healthcare, rather than just throw a bunch of tech guys at solving the problems that healthcare is facing, we actually have a nurse on our staff, and she knows firsthand, working with, having worked in the environment, what the challenges are, what do we need to solve in that environment, right? What are those specific use cases that nurses have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, whether it's rounding, whether it's note taking, whether it's taking someone's temperature, right? What happens in a day-to-day clinical setting, right? And then let's try and solve those challenges that occur, as opposed to just saying, hey, adopt this and use it, right? So it's two-part. One is taking a challenge and then working at it piece by piece, task by task, and getting some quick wins initially. And then second is not treating it as technology is, but looking at it as a challenge, and then applying technology to the challenge to actually solve it. I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely, and that's a very clear way you walked through that, because again, understanding the use cases, the purpose for it, but also you mentioned AI. It's really coming into effect, because I know that you have some products in there that are really about empathetic engagement, right, within the different industries. Talk a little bit about that AI aspect, just that part of it, the connection.
Yeah, so the way AI plays into this, it's kind of like the software or the brains behind the robots, right? So robot is a piece of hardware, and it doesn't do much without, the robot being programmed. So, for example, we have an interactive robot named Temi, and you really need to apply or put applications on top of it, for it to really do what it needs to do or solve a problem. Fortunately, it comes with a software development kit, and we built a lot of custom applications depending on the use case. But AI is if you look at a large language model, if you just break it down, it's basically taking data sets and making decisions for you. It's got an encoder and a decoder, but you need to feed it, you need to train it, you need to prompt it, and depending on which industry you're in, you need to go really deep into that industry and know how to use those large language models, because otherwise it's useless. I mean, even when it comes to prompting, you got to know, change the way you ask it. And even if you ask it a question, there may be ways to ask the same question 10 different ways, and you get 10 different answers. So I think part of this is being able to change the way us as humans behave with AI. And part of it is leveraging the technology and harnessing what it can do.
Yeah, and you mentioned prompting. We've all got to become prompt, experts to a certain degree. How to speak to the AI, like you mentioned, it's almost like a whole different language, which is really interesting. My closing question here is this: I like a fun one. What's fun about robotics? What do you enjoy the most? Like, what makes you sit there and say, this is great? Because I know with us, with video, when we record videos and we do our thing at Dub, we love doing it. So for you, when do you sit back and say, that aspect of robotics and AI and the technology, it just is pretty awesome?
Yeah, so I think the fun part about being in this business is that not every day is the same. There's always a new challenge, and we're learning just as much as the customer is every day. And even though we've been at this for quite a while and we've learned a lot along the way, there's certainly new challenges every day. But I think if you look at robotics, we haven't really had a ChatGPT moment yet, but I think it's coming, and it's going to be here before you know it. There's a lot of investment being made in robotics, and it's not just a cool shiny thing. I think the aha moment is when people see the value and see how it's helping them. And there's this notion called cobotics, where robots and humans are working side by side. And when you see the value that it brings, and you see the the efficiencies that are gained through the data that it is able to generate, that's when you really start to have sort of that moment where you enjoy what you're doing, and you enjoy the challenges that you've been through to get you to that point. So I think it's just it's just having something new every day that comes up, and solving it and seeing the customer be happy is what it's all about for us.
It just makes so much sense with the way the world's going. It's an inevitability. There are some people that maybe have some reservations in terms of AI, because as we're growing here, there are questions. But I think, like you've laid out today, there are specific places where robotics and it can work alongside humans. That's the biggest thing. Like you said, co-robotics. It's a great phrase. I like that, co-robotics. Well, listen, any last thoughts before we go today? Anything you want to say to the audience in terms of anything maybe new and exciting that you're working on that you kind of want to hint at, but you don't want to give away?
Yeah, we're working on a lot of different areas, but the one area we're looking at in the immediate near future is really educating our customers, because I think education is key when it comes to robotics and AI. So in the very near future, we'll be introducing some AI courses along with robotics as well, that we're going to introduce on our website for all of our customers, so people can learn about robotics, people can learn about AI, how to get started, what to be prepared for. So look for that, as well as we'll have some great surprises next year as well. So we're looking forward to this journey that we're on.
That's really exciting. And everybody out there, if you want to check out HelloGuard, on Instagram at HelloGuard, on Facebook HelloGuard, on LinkedIn at HelloGuard, and also on their website right down here, which you can see right there to check them out. But we really appreciate the time today, Sanjeev. It's been a wonderful, enlightening conversation, and it's always interesting to hear from sales leaders and creative leaders like yourself, and the strategies and challenges that you've had, and it pushes all of us to go forward. So thank you so much for jumping on today.
Thank you.
See you next episode, everybody.